Hello, friends. Today, I want to share a story about my love for traveling and how learning English completely changed my travel experiences. Traveling has always been a big part of my life. I've always loved the idea of visiting new places, seeing different cultures, tasting delicious food, and meeting interesting people from all over the world. It's like an adventure every time I step out of my home. When I was younger, I dreamed about seeing famous places like the Eiffel Tower in Paris, the beaches in Thailand, or the streets of New York City. I imagined walking through these amazing places, talking to locals, and learning about their lives. But when I finally got the chance to travel, I discovered something that made my trips very difficult. I didn't know English. You see, English is a language that people speak almost everywhere in the world. It doesn't matter if you're in Europe, Asia, or America. English is often the common language that connects people. But back then, I didn't know this. I thought I could just get by speaking my own language, but I quickly realized it wasn't enough. Let me give you an example. I remember the first time I traveled to an international airport. I was so excited about my trip, but as soon as I arrived, I felt nervous. All the signs were in English, directions to the gates, announcements about flights, and even the menus in the food court. I couldn't understand anything. I tried to ask someone for help, but they only spoke English. I felt so embarrassed because I couldn't communicate. Another time, I was at a restaurant in a new country. The menu was in English, and I didn't know how to order my food. I wanted to ask the waiter for suggestions, but I didn't know what to say. I ended up just pointing at something on the menu, hoping it was good. It was such a stressful experience. These situations kept happening every time I traveled. I couldn't ask for directions, book a hotel, or even make friends with other travelers because I didn't know English. I felt like I was missing out on so much. Traveling was supposed to be fun, but it was turning into a stressful and lonely experience. That's when I realized how important English is for traveling. It's not just about speaking to people, it's about feeling confident and independent. Knowing English allows you to read signs, understand maps, ask for help, and even make new friends. It opens so many doors and makes traveling so much easier and more enjoyable. So, I made a decision. I told myself, if I want to travel and truly enjoy it, I need to learn English. At first, I wasn't sure if I could do it. Learning a new language seemed so hard, but I knew it was necessary. I wanted to explore the world without feeling scared or confused. That's how my journey to learning English began. And let me tell you, it was one of the best decisions I ever made. It completely changed the way I travel and gave me so much confidence. But before I tell you how I learned English, let me share more about why it was so important for my travels. Stay with me, because the story gets even more interesting. Let me tell you about one of the most unforgettable moments from my travels. A time when not knowing English caused a lot of confusion and even made me laugh later. It was both embarrassing and eye-opening, and it taught me how important it is to know basic English phrases for traveling. A few years ago, I visited a beautiful city abroad. I was so excited to explore everything, the streets, the food, the culture. On my second day there, I decided to visit a famous museum that I had read about before my trip. I woke up early, packed my bag, and left my hotel feeling ready for an adventure. I asked the hotel receptionist for the museum's name and address, and they gave me a small map. Everything seemed perfect, but that's where the trouble began. When I got to the bus stop, I realized I didn't know how to ask which bus would take me to the museum. All the signs were in English, and the announcements were in English too. I looked around, hoping to find someone to help me. Finally, I saw a friendly-looking man standing nearby. I walked up to him and said, "Museum, here?" while pointing at the map. The man smiled and started explaining something to me, but he spoke so quickly in English that I couldn't understand a single word. He seemed to notice my confusion, so he pointed to a bus and said something like, "This one, but change. Number 5. I nodded, pretending I understood, and got on the bus he pointed to. As the bus started moving, I began to worry. I wasn't sure if I was going in the right direction. I didn't understand the signs or the announcements inside the bus. After about 20 minutes, the bus stopped and everyone got off. I was so confused because I thought this wasn't the museum. I tried asking the bus driver, but he didn't understand me because I didn't know how to explain myself in English. I got off the bus and realized I was completely lost. I didn't know where I was or how to get back. I looked around and found a small cafe. I thought, maybe someone inside can help me. I went in and tried to ask the staff for directions. I said, "Museum?" and showed them the map. But they looked just as confused as I felt. Finally, one of the cafe staff members understood what I was asking. She spoke a little English and told me to take a taxi instead of the bus. But then I faced another problem. I didn't know how to talk to the taxi driver. When the taxi arrived, I simply handed him the map and said, "Here, please." Luckily, the driver understood and took me to the museum. When I finally reached the museum, I was so tired and frustrated. I had wasted so much time and energy because I didn't know how to ask for simple things like directions or bus numbers in English. I couldn't even thank the people who tried to help me because I didn't know the right words. Looking back, it's a funny story now, but at that moment, it felt like a disaster. That experience taught me a big lesson. If you want to travel and enjoy your trip, you need to know basic English phrases. Simple sentences like, "Which bus do I take? How much does it cost?" or "Can you help me?" can save you from so much trouble. After that trip, I promised myself that I would learn these phrases before my next adventure. I realized that knowing even a little bit of English can make a huge difference when you're traveling. It helps you communicate with people, understand directions, and avoid getting lost. That incident was embarrassing, but it was also the push I needed to start learning English. And I'm so glad it happened because it made my future trips so much easier and more enjoyable. Let me tell you how I started learning English for traveling. It's an exciting part of my journey. After the incident at the museum, I knew something had to change. I couldn't keep traveling to new places and feeling confused, embarrassed, or even lost. I remember sitting in my hotel room that evening, thinking about how much easier my trip would have been if I had known just a little bit of English. That moment was when I made a decision. I would learn English. At first, the idea of learning a new language seemed overwhelming. I thought, where do I even start? Should I take a class? Should I buy books? Can I even do this? But I reminded myself why I needed to learn English. It wasn't just for fun. It was for my travels, for my adventures, and to make my experiences better. That motivation was strong enough to push me to take the first step. I started small because I didn't want to feel overwhelmed. The first thing I did was write down the most important phrases I thought I would need for traveling. For example, I wrote down sentences like, "Where is the nearest hotel? How much does this cost? Can you help me? I need directions." I also included words like bus, train, airport, restaurant, and bathroom. These were things I knew I would need to talk about while traveling. Just having these phrases written down made me feel like I was already making progress. Next, I looked for resources that could help me. Since I didn't have time to join a formal class, I turned to technology. I downloaded a free language learning app on my phone. The app was simple and perfect for beginners like me. It taught me basic English words and phrases through pictures and games. I practiced with it every day, even if it was just for 10 or 15 minutes. I also started watching videos online. I found travel vloggers who spoke English and talked about their trips. At first, I couldn't understand everything they were saying, but I tried to focus on the words I recognized. I even paused the videos and repeated phrases out loud to practice my pronunciation. Another thing I did was listen to English podcasts. I found podcasts specifically for beginners, where they spoke slowly and used simple words. I would listen to these podcasts while walking, cooking, or even lying in bed. They helped me get used to hearing English and made me feel more confident about understanding the language. Writing was another part of my learning process. I bought a small notebook and called it my travel English journal. Every day, I wrote down new words and sentences I learned. For example, if I learned the phrase, "What time does the bus leave?" I would write it down and practice it. Sometimes I even wrote short dialogues, pretending I was talking to someone at an airport or a hotel. One of the most helpful things I did was practice speaking. I didn't have many English-speaking friends, so I found a language exchange app. Through the app, I connected with people from different countries who wanted to practice my language, while I practiced English with them. We would have short conversations, and they were very patient with me when I made mistakes. I also tried to include English in my daily life. For example, when I went to the grocery store in my hometown, I practiced saying the names of items in English. If I saw a sign in my language, I tried to think of how it would look in English. These small habits helped me feel more comfortable with the language. Of course, it wasn't easy. There were days when I felt frustrated because I couldn't remember a word or I said something wrong. But I kept reminding myself why I was doing this. I imagined myself standing at an airport, confidently asking for directions, or sitting in a cafe in a new country, easily ordering my favorite drink. That vision kept me going. After a few weeks of consistent practice, I started noticing small improvements. I could recognize more words in English signs. I could say simple phrases without hesitating. And most importantly, I felt more confident about traveling. This was just the beginning of my English learning journey, but it was a crucial step. I realized that learning English didn't have to be perfect. It just had to be practical. And every little effort I made brought me closer to my goal of traveling the world with ease. Next, I'll tell you about how I started using my new English skills during my travels. Stay with me. It gets even better. As I continued my English learning journey, I realized that learning a language isn't just about knowing grammar or building a big vocabulary. It's about being able to use the language in real-life situations, especially while traveling. So, I focused on learning practical phrases, simple sentences that could help me communicate easily when I was on the go. Let me share some of these phrases and how they helped me during my travels. One of the first phrases I learned was, "How much is this?" It's such a basic question, but it's so important when you're shopping or paying for anything. I remember using this phrase during one of my trips when I went to a local market. The stalls were filled with colorful souvenirs, handmade jewelry, and delicious snacks. I wanted to buy a small gift for my family, but the prices weren't displayed. I approached a shopkeeper, pointed at a beautiful scarf, and confidently asked, "How much is this?" The shopkeeper smiled and responded in English. I might not have understood everything he said, but I caught the number, $10. That simple question made the interaction smooth, and I felt proud of myself for using English to communicate. Another useful phrase I learned was, "Can you help me?" This phrase became my go-to whenever I needed assistance, whether it was finding a location, understanding directions, or figuring out how something worked. I remember one specific situation at a train station. I had a ticket, but I couldn't figure out which platform I needed to go to. The signs were in English, but I was still learning, so I wasn't confident enough to understand them completely. I saw a station worker and walked up to him. I said, "Excuse me, can you help me?" He looked at my ticket and pointed me to the right platform. It was such a small moment, but it saved me a lot of stress and time. When it came to eating out, I found phrases like, "What do you recommend?" or "I would like to order," incredibly helpful. I remember dining at a cozy restaurant during one of my trips. The menu was in English, but there were so many items, and I wasn't sure what to choose. I asked the waiter, "What do you recommend?" He smiled and suggested a popular local dish. I repeated, "I would like to order that, please." It was a simple conversation, but it made the experience so much more enjoyable. Another time, I had to use the phrase, "Where is the nearest?" It's a lifesaver when you're looking for specific places like a hotel, a bathroom, or a train station. I used it once when I was exploring a city and needed to find an ATM. I asked a passerby, "Where is the nearest ATM?" They gave me directions, and I managed to find it without any trouble. Booking transportation was another area where I relied heavily on English phrases. For example, phrases like, "I need a taxi," or "How far is it?" were incredibly useful. I remember calling a taxi from my hotel to the airport. I told the receptionist, "I need a taxi to the airport, please." When the taxi driver arrived, I asked, "How far is it to the airport?" Knowing these simple phrases made the entire process smooth and stress-free. One of my favorite phrases was, "I don't understand." It might sound strange, but it's a very useful sentence when you're learning a new language. If someone spoke too fast or used words I didn't know, I would simply say, "I don't understand. Can you say it slowly?" Most people were kind and happy to repeat themselves or explain in simpler terms. Another essential phrase was, "Excuse me, I'm lost." This one saved me during one of my solo adventures. I had been walking around a beautiful neighborhood, enjoying the sights, and I didn't realize how far I had wandered. When I tried to go back, I couldn't figure out the way. I stopped a local and said, "Excuse me, I'm lost. Can you help me find this street?" I showed them the name of my destination, and they gave me clear directions. Learning and using these phrases made traveling so much easier and more enjoyable. It gave me the confidence to interact with people and solve problems on my own. Every time I successfully used a phrase, it felt like a small victory. It showed me that even basic English could make a big difference. If you're planning to travel, I highly recommend starting with these practical phrases. You don't need to learn the entire language right away. Just focus on the sentences and words that you're likely to use. It could be asking for directions, ordering food, or understanding schedules. The more I practiced these phrases, the more natural they felt. And the best part? Every interaction became an opportunity to learn more. Sometimes the people I spoke with would teach me new words or correct my pronunciation. It was like having a mini English lesson everywhere I went. Now, I can't imagine traveling without knowing these phrases. They've opened so many doors for me and made my adventures so much more meaningful. In the next part of my story, I'll share how learning English transformed my travel experiences even further. Stay with me. It only gets better. Learning English was an exciting journey, but it wasn't without its challenges. I faced several obstacles along the way, and each one taught me something valuable. Let me share some of the difficulties I encountered and how I managed to overcome them. 1. Struggling with pronunciation. One of the first challenges I faced was pronunciation. English words didn't always sound the way they looked. For example, I remember trying to pronounce the word schedule for the first time. I said it like "ske-do-lay," which made a friend chuckle kindly and correct me. There were so many words like this, words that looked simple but had tricky sounds. To overcome this, I turned to technology. I used language apps that had pronunciation guides. These apps would let me hear a word and then record myself saying it. I could compare my recording with the correct pronunciation and adjust accordingly. This was incredibly helpful. I also started watching English videos with subtitles. Hearing native speakers pronounce words helped me a lot. Sometimes I would pause the video and repeat the words out loud, trying to match their accent. Slowly but surely, my pronunciation improved. 2. Expanding my vocabulary. Another big challenge was building my vocabulary. At first, I only knew a handful of words like hello, thank you, and yes. But when I needed to express something more complex, I often found myself stuck. To tackle this, I started learning 5 new words every day. I wrote them down in a small notebook and tried to use them in sentences. For example, if I learned the word delicious, I would practice saying, "This food is delicious," whenever I ate something I liked. I also used flashcards. I created cards with English words on one side and their meanings in my language on the other. Reviewing these cards every day helped me remember new words. Additionally, I learned words by context. For instance, when I watched English videos or read short articles, I tried to guess the meanings of unfamiliar words based on the surrounding sentences. This method made learning vocabulary feel natural. One of the hardest challenges for me was overcoming my fear of speaking English. I worried about making mistakes or sounding silly. This fear often held me back from practicing, even though I knew practice was essential. To overcome this, I reminded myself that making mistakes was part of the learning process. I started speaking English with people I trusted, like friends who were patient and encouraging. I also joined language exchange apps where I could practice with native speakers online. These conversations were short and informal, which made them less intimidating. Another thing I did was practice speaking to myself. I would stand in front of a mirror and have pretend conversations. For example, I imagined ordering food at a restaurant and practiced saying, "I would like a coffee, please." This helped me build confidence in my speaking skills. English is spoken in many countries, and people have different accents. At first, I struggled to understand certain accents, especially when people spoke quickly. It was frustrating because even when I knew the words, their accent made it hard for me to recognize them. To get better at this, I exposed myself to different types of English. I listened to podcasts from the UK, the US, and Australia. I also watched movies and shows from different countries. The more I listened, the more familiar I became with various accents. I even started to enjoy noticing the unique sounds of each one. 5. Grammar confusion. Grammar was another area that confused me. I struggled with things like when to use is versus are, or the difference between past and present tense. There were so many rules, and it felt overwhelming. To simplify things, I focused on learning one grammar rule at a time. For example, I spent a week practicing how to use is and are correctly. I wrote sentences like, "He is happy," and "they are playing," until I felt confident. I also found online videos where teachers explained grammar in simple ways. These videos often included examples and exercises, which made the rules easier to understand. The last challenge was staying consistent. Learning a new language takes time, and there were days when I felt tired or discouraged. Sometimes I thought, am I even improving? To stay motivated, I set small, achievable goals. For example, I aimed to learn 10 new phrases in a week or watch one English video every day. Celebrating these small milestones kept me going. I also reminded myself of my purpose, to travel the world with confidence. I imagined myself speaking English at an airport, ordering food at a cafe, or asking for directions in a new city. This vision gave me the energy to keep practicing, even on tough days. Looking back, I realized that these challenges were actually opportunities. Each obstacle pushed me to try new methods and improve my skills. They taught me patience, persistence, and creativity. For anyone else learning English, I want to say this. It's okay to face challenges. Don't be afraid of making mistakes or feeling confused. Every step you take, no matter how small, brings you closer to your goal. Keep practicing, stay positive, and remember why you started. In the next part of my story, I'll share how all this hard work paid off during my travels. Let me tell you, it was worth it. Learning English completely transformed my traveling experiences, and I remember my first successful trip after all my hard work like it was yesterday. It was a journey I had been dreaming of for a long time. A solo trip to a country where English was widely spoken. This trip marked a turning point in my life, showing me how learning a new language could open doors and create unforgettable memories. Before the trip, I felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. I had been practicing English for months, learning practical phrases, improving my pronunciation, and building my confidence. But this was the real test. Would I be able to navigate a new country, interact with locals, and handle unexpected situations in English? The moment I arrived at the airport, I realized just how much English was going to help me. From checking in my luggage to going through security, every interaction required English. When I approached the counter, I confidently said, "Hello, I'd like to check in for my flight." The staff member smiled and asked for my passport. For the first time, I felt a sense of accomplishment. I could communicate without hesitation. During the flight, I even had a small conversation with the flight attendant. She asked, "Would you like chicken or pasta for your meal?" Without panicking, I replied, "I'd like chicken, please." It was such a simple exchange, but it felt like a big victory. When I landed at my destination, the challenges began. I had to find my way to the hotel, and English became my most valuable tool. I went to the information desk and asked, "Excuse me, where can I find a taxi?" The staff member gave me clear directions, and I followed them confidently. Once I found a taxi, I told the driver, "Please take me to this address." He nodded, and I felt a wave of relief. During the drive, I even practiced small talk by asking him, "Is this a busy city?" His response was friendly, and I realized how much easier it was to connect with people when you could speak their language. Checking into the hotel was another moment where English saved the day. The receptionist greeted me warmly, and I said, "Hello, I have a reservation under my name." She quickly found my booking and asked, "Would you like a room on a higher floor or closer to the lobby?" I replied, "A higher floor, please," feeling proud of how naturally the conversation flowed. Later, when I needed extra towels, I called the front desk and said, "Can I have 2 more towels, please?" The staff brought them to my room within minutes. Simple moments like these showed me how much English could make life easier. One of the most exciting parts of the trip was exploring the city. I visited famous landmarks, local markets and restaurants, and English was my constant companion. At a cafe, I ordered confidently, "I'd like a cappuccino and a sandwich, please." The barista smiled and asked, "Would you like your sandwich toasted?" I replied, "Yes, please," feeling completely at ease. At the local market, I found myself bargaining for a handmade souvenir. I asked the seller, "How much is this?" When she told me the price, I tried negotiating by saying, "Can you give me a better price?" To my surprise, she laughed and agreed to a discount. It was a small moment, but it made me feel like I truly belonged. One of the best parts of the trip was meeting new people. I joined a group tour to explore a historical site, and everyone spoke English. At first I felt shy, but then I introduced myself. "Hi, I'm Adam Smith. Where are you from?" The other travelers were friendly and shared their stories, and soon we were laughing and taking photos together. Later, I even exchanged contact information with a few of them, saying, "Let's stay in touch." It was amazing to see how English helped me build connections and create memories with people from around the world. Of course, not everything went perfectly. One day, I got lost while trying to find a museum. Instead of panicking, I approached a passerby and said, "Excuse me, I'm lost. Can you help me find this place?" I showed them the address, and they kindly gave me directions in English. Another time, I accidentally ordered the wrong dish at a restaurant because I misunderstood the menu. When the waiter brought the food, I said, "I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Can I change my order?" He smiled and fixed it for me. These small moments taught me that it's okay to make mistakes as long as you try to communicate. By the end of the trip, I felt a deep sense of accomplishment. Learning English had made my travels so much smoother and more enjoyable. I could navigate new places, interact with locals, and handle unexpected challenges without fear. This experience also gave me the confidence to plan more trips in the future. I realized that English wasn't just a tool for communication, it was a key to independence and freedom. If you're thinking about learning English for traveling, I encourage you to start today. The effort you put in will pay off in ways you can't even imagine. My journey showed me that with a little patience and practice, anyone can use English to explore the world. In the next part of my story, I'll share how learning English not only made me a better traveler, but also opened up new opportunities in my life. Stay tuned. It's an adventure you won't want to miss. As I look back on my journey of learning English for traveling, I can confidently say it was one of the best decisions I ever made. English opened doors to new experiences, made my travels smoother, and allowed me to connect with people from all over the world. Whether it was asking for directions, ordering food, or making new friends, English made every step of my journey easier and more enjoyable. Now, as I conclude this story, I want to share my thoughts and advice for anyone considering learning English for travel. If you're planning to explore new countries or dream of adventures in far-off places, let me tell you, English is your ticket to a better, more exciting experience. Traveling is all about connecting with people, places, and cultures. And English serves as a universal bridge. It's spoken in airports, hotels, restaurants, and tourist attractions around the globe. Even in countries where English isn't the first language, people often use it to communicate with visitors. Learning English for traveling isn't just about understanding signs or menus. It's about having the confidence to explore without hesitation. Imagine arriving in a new country and being able to say, "Can you recommend a good restaurant?" Or, "Where is the nearest train station?" These simple phrases can make your journey stress-free and memorable. I know starting something new can feel overwhelming, but trust me, learning English for traveling is worth every effort. You don't need to become fluent overnight. Even learning the basics can make a huge difference. When I began, I started small, with just a few words and phrases, and built my skills step by step. The beauty of learning English is that it grows with you. The more you practice, the more confident you'll feel. And the first time you use English successfully during your travels, you'll realize just how powerful it is. Let me share some practical advice to help you get started on your English learning journey. Consistency is key. Even spending 10 to 15 minutes a day practicing English can lead to big improvements over time. Start with simple activities like learning 5 new words each day or listening to an English podcast while you commute. Daily practice helps build a habit and keeps you motivated. When learning English for travel, focus on practical phrases you'll use frequently. For example, where is the nearest bus stop? Can I have the menu, please? How much does this cost? These phrases will help you navigate airports, restaurants, markets, and more. Write down these phrases in a small notebook and carry it with you. During your travels, you can refer to it whenever needed. There are so many apps and tools available to help you learn English. Apps like Duolingo, Babbel, and Google Translate can teach you vocabulary, pronunciation, and phrases. You can even use voice assistants like Siri or Alexa to practice asking questions in English. Watch videos and tutorials on platforms like YouTube. Many channels focus specifically on English for travelers, teaching you everything from common phrases to cultural tips. Speaking is one of the most important skills for traveling, so don't be afraid to practice. Start by speaking to yourself. For example, imagine you're at a restaurant and practice saying, "I'd like a coffee, please." If possible, find a language partner or join a conversation group. Practicing with others, even online, can help you build confidence and improve your fluency. Learning English is not just about words. It's also about understanding how people communicate. For example, in some countries, politeness is emphasized. Phrases like, "excuse me," or "could you please," go a long way. Research the customs of the country you're visiting to understand how English is used in that context. Mistakes are a natural part of learning. When you travel, you might say the wrong word or pronounce something incorrectly, and that's okay. Most people will appreciate your effort and help you out. The important thing is to keep trying. Learning English for traveling isn't just about convenience. It's about empowerment. It gives you the freedom to explore, communicate, and fully immerse yourself in new cultures. It transforms travel from something intimidating to something exciting and full of possibilities. If you're just starting out, remember that every small step counts. Begin with the basics, practice regularly, and stay positive. The journey might take time, but the rewards are incredible. So, whether you're planning a short vacation or a long adventure, take the time to learn English. Your future travels will be more enjoyable, meaningful, and stress-free because of it. And who knows, you might even discover a new passion for languages along the way. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it inspires you to begin your own journey of learning English for travel. Safe travels and happy learning.